Good morning to Asia, good afternoon to the Pacific, and good evening to the US and Latin America. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the APRU Multi-Hazardous Summer School Series, Session 1, Interdisciplinary Disaster Risk Reduction Research and Actions in Japan. This webinar is organized by the Association of Pacific Rim University Multi-Hazardous Program and the International Research Institute of Disaster Science, IRIDIS, Tohoku University in Japan. I'm Kanako Iuchi, Associate Professor of Tohoku University and Program Director of the APRU Multi-Hazardous Program. This session shares the latest research and activities on disaster risk reduction based on Japanese experiences. It covers various fields such as disaster and cultural heritage, urban planning, and tsunami engineering. This session invites 5 speakers from APRU Secretariat and IRIDIS at Tohoku University. From the APRU Secretariat, Dr. Christopher Tremewan, Secretary General, kindly sent us the video recording of his opening remarks. From IRIDIS, we have 4 more speakers. Professor Fumihiko Imamura, Director of IRIDIS, Professor John Morris, Dr. Kanako Iuchi, and Dr. Anawat Sapasri. They will share the research and experiences at several disasters, including the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. As you know, this Tohoku region, including Sendai City, was severely affected by the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami in 2011. So it has already been 11 years since the tsunami, but further recovery efforts are still needed. While listening to the presentations, please do not forget to send us questions using the Q&A function. After each presentation, we will have a Q&A session to answer those questions. So now I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Dr. Christopher Tremewan, Secretary General of the APRU Secretariat. Unfortunately, he will not be able to join us, but kindly he sent us his welcome remarks. Dr. Christopher Tremewan was elected as APRU's 4th Secretary General and took up the role from June 2011. Before heading the APRU International Secretariat, he was the Vice President and Pro-Vice Chancellor International of the University of Auckland, New Zealand.
Welcome everyone to this APRU lecture series on multi-hazards. At a time when the world is experiencing so many extreme events and the burden of them is falling disproportionately on the most vulnerable, we need more than ever the research, expertise, and community engagement of academics immersed in the challenges of disaster risk reduction. So it is a special pleasure to acknowledge the insightful leadership and support over many years of Professor Imamura, Director of IRIDIS at Tohoku University. I also thank our speakers from our other member universities and external partners, including Chulalongkorn University, the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance, Sichuan University, Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and the APEC Emergency Preparedness Capacity Building Center. The varied disciplinary backgrounds of our speakers demonstrate the interdisciplinary nature of the challenges posed by disaster risk reduction. Today's lectures focus on learnings from Japan, and the second set of lectures draws on knowledge and experience from a diversity of contexts. For those of you who are new to APRU, let me give you a very brief overview. As a network of 60 research universities around the Pacific Rim, we see our role as providing a neutral platform for collaboration. We aim to harness the collective capacities of member universities to contribute to international policy making and the policy processes around disaster risk reduction. The Multi-Hazards program is one of our long-standing APRU programs, and it is hosted by IRIDIS Tohoku University since April 2013. 2 years after the great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. The key objective of the program, adopted from the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, is to increase DRR research for regional, natural, and local application, support capacity building, and engage in the interface between policy and science for decision-making. On this slide, you can see the priorities of the program listed in the 4 colored panels. They reflect the program's shift to a broader focus, to acknowledging the links between various hazards, a shift partly arising from our members' responses to the current pandemic. Indeed, the Sendai Framework recognizes a holistic approach to manage risks associated with both natural and human-induced hazards. It also refers to the implementation of an all-hazards approach to managing disaster risk. Over the past 3 years, the Multi-Hazards Program hosted numerous online lectures and joint publications to share expertise and knowledge on prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. And this is also the 10th year of the summer school. To add to this, we recently had the benefit of a book entitled Safety and Resilience of Higher Educational Institutes, Considerations for a Post-COVID-19 Pandemic Analysis. It is co-edited by Dr. Kanako Iuchi, Dr. Indrajit Pal, and Professor Rajiv Shaw, and it includes the insights of 14 APRU scholars and numerous external partners. Beyond this, in September, we have a special workshop co-organized with the University of Hawaii at Manoa and the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance and Pacific Disaster Center. Then in November, the Faculty of Engineering and the Risk and Disaster Management Program of Chulalongkorn University is going to host the 17th APRU Multi-Hazard Symposium in Bangkok. And we look to full engagement from some of you who are participating today. To find out more information about APRU and our other many research-related programs and network activities, please visit our website at apru.org and have a look at our annual report and the many other resources available to you there. In concluding, I would like to thank again Professor Imamura and Dr. Izumi, who are the key drivers of the Multi-Hazards Program. I'd like to thank also the international core group of the program, who are 12 APRU academic experts across the network. And of course, again, the colleagues at Hazardous and at Tohoku University, providing their strong support to this program. Tohoku University will be reaching the official 10th year of hosting the program in April 2023, a time to celebrate that so much has been achieved. I wish you all the best for this important series of lectures. Thank you so much.
I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to Dr. Tremelan for sending us this message when he is extremely busy. So now I would like to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Anawat Sapasli. He's my colleague in Hazardous, Associate Professor at Hazardous Tohoku University. He obtained a PhD in tsunami engineering from Tohoku University in 2010 and joined Hazardous in 2012. His research focuses on tsunami numerical simulation, tsunami fragility analysis, and tsunami evacuation and disaster mitigation education. His research has received several awards, including the former Japanese Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone in 2018, and the Commendation for Science and Technology by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology, the Young Scientist Award in 2022. So thank you so much, Dr. Anawat, for your participation today. So floor is yours.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, just a phone coming. This will be okay. Okay, let me share my screen. Thank you for your introduction. I hope the slide is good now. Can you see my slide and my voice clearly?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, let me also turn on my stopwatch so I can make sure that I have 18 minutes. Okay, sure. Thank you once again for inviting me. It's a great honor to share some of my recent research output and some perspective on how Japanese research could corroborate or contribute to others countries in the world. Because actually in both Semora and myself, we are from the same lab, and so I hope that my talk and his talk will not so overlap. So I intend not to speak about 2011 tsunami in detail. So for my part, I would like to talk more about the sea impact, sea level rise impacts on tsunami, and some recent research that we collaborate with other countries and we contribute to other countries. Before that, I would like to give you an overview of tsunami in the world. I actually did this one has been shown by our report made some years ago, and I would like it's a good chance to briefly show you again. As you can see, tsunami is not a problem of one country, but because of the water is related to our countries. For example, for today we are talking about the Pacific Rim. So, for example, you can see the red shows the height of tsunami simulated from many cases, and yeah, more darker red means more higher tsunami. If you talk about from 1970 well, we did this one in 2016, so we have the tsunami in that until that one year. But anyway, so if we pick up this tsunami in these 40-50 years where we have the direct experience, we can see that we only have the 2011, the Great Japan earthquake and tsunami, and in the Indian Ocean we have 2004. But yeah, if we look at the more even older, back to 400 years ago, beyond our direct experience, you can see that actually, of course, Pacific Rim is famous for having many tsunamis, but also actually in Indian Ocean also, and also the Atlantic Ocean also, there are several large tsunamis as well. So again, it's important to realize tsunami awareness in not only the Pacific, of course, yeah, in other part of the world, and hopefully what we have learned from tsunami experience from the Pacific Rim network could how we could contribute to other countries. But these tsunamis are mainly caused by earthquake. But for my talk, I would like to give you some examples that the tsunami which occur not only by earthquake. First one, 2018 in Indonesia, Sulawesi Island or Palu City. You can see that this is the bay, and actually the earthquake happened, but the earthquake itself, it has a lateral slip where the large tsunami is not expected in general, but it caused strong ground shaking and submarine landslide in many places. So as you can see in this animation, you can see that several wave has been occur and arrive within a few minutes. So that's kind of a limitation of the current tsunami warning system. Even in Japan, if such thing happen very close, still very difficult to predict. And another event is again in the same year in Indonesia, when the volcanic eruption of the Krakatau into. So as you can see, this time no earthquake at all, but the eruption caused the mass failure and generate tsunami through the whole Sunda Strait, which arrived both Sumatra and Java Island. So again, this event also caused many deaths because the current tsunami warning is not cover non-seismic case. Of course, after this, the Indonesian government installed the buoy so that even without the ground shaking, they can detect the waves. And if I hope that you still remember what happened in January this year, where the very massive eruption of volcano in Tonga also caused tsunami that arrived many part of the world, including Japan. You can see before and after how it happened, and also this graph shows where we have the observation in Japan, where we observe the change of the air, the atmospheric pressure, and the wave comes after that. So at that time, the Japan Meteorological Agency also they surprised about this phenomena, and they sudden launch the warning in Japan after they saw this observation. So yes, currently together with our colleagues in our lab, we also developed a new simulation model so that we can also simulate the waves from the change of the air pressure like this. This is just some example of what we are doing right now. So of course we have many models or experience of doing earthquake generate tsunami, but within these few years there are many examples of non-seismic tsunami. So it's still our challenge on how we could find again this kind of unusual tsunami in the future. Another important perspective is that you know that the global warming issue is very important, and kind of the global issues. For us as a tsunami disaster, the mechanism is quite simple. So the global warming caused sea level rise, and the sea level, so it's like we have tsunami on the top of the raised sea level. So that means the tsunami height or the inundation area will be also high, increase as well. And for example, but it's not always linear. In some area, depending on the topography, local topography. For example, this one, even the level is increased 70 centimeter, but the total height at the end can be like the double. And this map also show in case without sea level rise in blue, and other case with sea level rise, you can see the increase of the inundation area or distance in the future. It is the same, so I would like to skip. And this is another example. For example, this one school in the southern part of Miyagi Prefecture. At that time of 2011 tsunami, the wave reached to the second floor, where all school children and teachers they will survive under the rooftop space. So again, if the tsunami happened with the increased sea level or during the high tide, they may not save, for example. So this kind of thing should be also more considered in the future countermeasure or planning. Now this is the same, so I will just skip because of the time. And regarding to sea level rise and tsunami, of course, in Japan, we also have many study, but I would like to also give some example of some countries in Asia. For example, yes, the impact can also similar to what I have shown in Japan. They do some simulation of different return period tsunami plus the sea level rise. So you can see that the inundation is getting more wider, and also the flow depth is getting bigger. And this is another perspective from my colleagues that they did simulation in Macau. You can see, for example, the relationship between the simulated tsunami flow depths and the return period. So with the normal sea level, if we talk about, for example, one meter tsunami, it could happen in every 900 years. But if we consider 50 centimeters zero rise or 1 meter zero rise, the same 1 meter return period could happen in a shorter return period. So it will be reduced from 900 to 800 to 400 years, something like that. So that means, on the other hand, so that means for the same size of the tsunami, it could come more frequently. So this is another thing that what we can say on the impact from zero rise, which is similar to the rain. This is similar things with what we did in Thailand. Having higher sea level rise level, the flood area will become bigger, and also the damage to the building will be more red, which is more we expect to be the damage to be higher. To be more quantify the damage. So we recently together with my student, we also apply some economic model so that we can evaluate the not only the direct loss but also indirect loss from the tsunami. We have some economical data apply with the our simulation result for each single grid size. And for example, when we apply to different tsunami source from the north or in the outer rise out in the outer sides of the Javan Trench, so we can see how the difference of the tsunami source will contribute or influence to different types of direct loss or indirect loss or different types of the industry. For example, we also have in economical data, we also have the value of each industry. In, for example, agriculture, the service, maintenance, or others industry. So we can, so then by using this, we can understand what from which source or from which types of tsunami, what which sectors will be much largely impact, so that the government or local government or the other the stakeholder itself can be well prepared. And yeah, also something like we also trying to understand more about the damage to the building. And yes, so for having not only earthquake tsunami but non earthquake tsunami, we can also make the comparison of the building damage and the flow depths for different kind of tsunami, including in the case that the tsunami is not generated by the earthquake. And this is one quick example that I would like to explain to you, introduce to you, is that if I'm not sure if if you have a chance to come to Sendai, please visit the tsunami affected area where we have we call multi-layer defense system. In Sendai, we have seawall and the highway and pine forests. This is at the time of the earthquake, 2011 earthquake and tsunami. After that, we make another road. We increase the road for 6 meters so that it could help prevent as another layer of the tsunami. At that time of 2011, this highway accidentally by chance helped to block the tsunami. So after that, we increased 6 meter of this road. So this kind of idea has been also implemented in the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami affected region, which is Banda Aceh. They have, and because if you know, Banda Aceh is very traffic jam area. So they have an idea of Sendai, if they build the ring road here, and you can see that this road can help reduce the flow depth behind the road. Still, this still feasible study process, but at least they start to implement or adapt the idea from Japan to other countries. And also for engineering perspective, we also have, sorry, I forgot to translate from Thai to English. But anyway, we also collaborate with Chulalongkorn University to apply some sediment transport model technique so that we can simulate sediments during tsunami. And in one study area in Thailand, we apply the same model and we calculate how the sand moved during the tsunami, and of course the sandy beach will be eroded, or the sand deposit will be moved to somewhere. So we would like to understand how the environmental change happens before the tsunami from the simulation. And we also work with Thailand, university in Thailand. We also for non-engineering perspective, we also did something like educational class in Hawaii. This is Jose Momura and myself and other colleagues that we did this kind of school in Hawaii. And for myself, I also have a chance to bring many Japanese professors to, for example, this one we did some tsunami deposit study, or I personally helped the Tsunami Museum in Thailand to share some information and improve their exhibition poster as well, and also to Thai media. And recently, from this year, we also start a new project with Indonesian members. We call Satreps project, which supported by JICA and JST from Japanese side. And because of the time, I don't want to speak everything. We have a website already, so if you want to know more detail, please go to our website. But in general, we are not only consider simulation of flood, tsunami, or high wave, but also we are consider how we can mitigate from this hazard, multi-hazard, using the ecosystem or nature-based solution, and also how we can make social implementation by using recent technology and educational activities. And almost the end of I think I have another 1 minute, so I would like to end my presentation by showing some our contribution through UN organization. For example, UNDP, we help supporting school evacuation drills in many countries in the Pacific countries, or the guideline for the evacuation drill in Thailand. And during the COVID-19, I also helped the UNDR and UNDP to make the guideline for evacuation during COVID-19, for example. So yeah, and this idea is from the Japanese guidelines. So I'm very happy that as a member of Japanese researcher, we could help contribute to many countries, including the Pacific Rim countries. So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anawat, for your very informative presentation. So, so I have a couple of questions for you. You also mentioned the impact of climate change on tsunami. Usually, we think the impact of climate change is rather water-related disasters like flood or typhoon, and we usually say geological disasters like earthquake has nothing to do with climate change. But you really pointed out, I think it's very good, pointed out the impact on tsunami as well. So for that matter, I think it is very important to update our inundation map and also the hazard map.
Yes.
including the impact of climate change. So how is the current situation of updating hazard mapping in Japan and or other areas? I think it's quite important to do so.
Okay, thank you for your question. So first, just last month, Miyagi Prefecture, they just released a new tsunami hazard map, and it was a very big news, maybe as you may know. But that map is not yet considered the sea level rise, but they oh well, I forgot to mention that at the time of 2000 tsunami, it was not in the high tide. It's like 1 meter lower than the high tide of the day. So for example, for the new map, they add the plus 1 meter, something like that. If we consider 2011 tsunami happened in the high tides, or if the seawall will be destroyed, if the water overtop the seawall. But as you mentioned, so sorry, in my slide I show my news, NHK News. Actually, just after that news, I got a contact from Ministry of MLIT, Land and Land and Transportation and Tourism. Yeah, so actually the country, Japanese government, they also just start to think about how they are going to add the influence of the sea level in the future as well. So so my short answer is that it's not yet implemented in the tsunami hazard map, but in nearly future they have to do some maintenance of the seawall, etc. So they would like to consider these things in the future. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nawat. Yes, I think it's very important and also to share that kind of information with other countries as well, because usually, as I mentioned, the climate change is only for the water related, but rather people do not consider the impact from earthquake or tsunami. Thank you so much.
Especially the small island countries, like, well, for example, in Indian Ocean, we have the Maldives, or we have many small island countries in the Pacific, as you know. So so this island is very highly impacted by the sea level rise itself, and then if we plus tsunami, that will be very difficult. So right now I have one student doing study like this in the Maldives. Yes, just for your information.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we have one a comment from the audience. And thank you so much for your presentation. And your presentation proved that efficient land use management, sound engineering measures are made in coastal. It's very important to made in coastal regions which are susceptible to tsunami impacts. So I think the audience totally agree with you.
Yeah, thank you. Especially, for example, in Indonesia, I'm not sure if everybody know, but they plans to move the new capital to East Kalimantan, right? So now still a forest, is it what I heard? But of course, if we think about the new capital in the future, it's not a 10-year scale, right? It's kind of 50 or 100 year, even more than that. So we should also consider the future perspective of sea level as well.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much. And also at the end, you mentioned that the impact of COVID-19 for tsunami, and I think it was very interesting. You introduced some collaboration with UNDP and Japanese government. So I'm sorry, you did not have enough time to speak, but can you please a little bit elaborate on that issue?
Yeah, so for example, the COVID stuff and tsunami. So as soon as the COVID outbreak, we also discuss among tsunami community, and we also make like something like poster that the tsunami evacuation order is higher than the COVID situation. I mean, even the city is now locked down, but if we have tsunami warning, you should evacuate, right? Well, it's kind of things. And also in Japan, we have the idea, well, it's 2 years ago, but the idea that to reduce the crowdedness of the evacuation shelter, like if you're in Japan, we know that if we have tsunami, we run to the school, right? School is kind of the first goal to evacuate, but in case of COVID, if everybody go to school, or if I live already far from tsunami, or not even from tsunami, but landslide or other types of hazard, if I'm safe already, but I don't have to go to evacuate to make it crowd. So check your hazard map if you are really safe from that hazard. So you don't have to avoid non-meaningless evacuation. And also you can please think of other choice. You can go to department store, you can go to hotel, you can go to your office or any other place that to reduce the crowdness of the evacuation area. So that's kind of Japanese idea we translate to English and help distributing this knowledge through collaboration with UNDR and UNDP.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, indeed, and it is very important to prepare, considering the beyond natural hazards, but like COVID-19, biological hazards when we make the plan for evacuation, and that current situation shows really that kind of reality. So, how do you know in other countries how it worked in the preparation of COVID-19 and disasters, how it impacted on their evacuation situation?
Well, for example, in Thailand and maybe also Indonesia, we normally not going, or we are not stay in the shelter. Based on my experience, the big flood in Bangkok, also the flood reached to my hometown, my house. My parents, they prefer to live in the second floor because the school is not well prepared, just for emergency, but it's not that good condition to stay like and for a long time. And the thing is that, for example, the flood in Bangkok, because the area is very flat, so the water stay for a few weeks. It's not like in Japan where the topography is very steep slope, so the water stay only 1 or 2 days. So yeah, the condition, the preparation of the shelter and the geographical situation is different. So people will just go to the place to get the goods and go back home and stay second floor, for example, and to make sure that the thief will not come to their house, for example. So the context is different. So I think that context may be only for Japan or some countries that they really stay in the shelter for a long time.
I say thank you so much for your sharing your experiences and research. It was very, very informative, and I found very interesting. I'm sure audience did too. So once again,
Thank you so much,
Dr. Anawat, for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'd like to invite the next speaker, Professor John Morris. He holds a doctorate in Japanese history from Tohoku University and specializes in the history of the Tohoku, northeastern region of Japan. He is a founding member and member of the board of directors of Miyagi Shiryo Network, a volunteer organization founded in 2003 to salvage historical heritage at risk after natural disasters. He's currently a visiting professor in disaster humanity and social science division in the disaster culture and archive studies lab at APRU. So thank you so much, Dr. Morris, for your participation for today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Izumi, for your introduction. I have only 20 minutes to speak, and I have too much to say. So I will go directly into my presentation, and please fasten your seat belts and be prepared for, oops, sorry, I did that too soon, for a very rushed talk. 画面の共有、これです。はい。スライド詳細書から。Oops. Okay. The title of my talk is Heritage or Just Garbage: How Private Documents Can Help Disaster Survivors and Communities. Stories from Northeastern Japan 2011. My talk is a joint research project between myself and Professor Kamiyama Machiko, who is a clinical psychologist and also happens to be my wife. this photograph here, please remember this building here, this little storehouse, caught in this mountain of wreckage here in the city of Ishinomaki, which is a little further up the coast from Sendai. Some revision. In 2011, a major earthquake occurred here off the coast of Japan. A very huge and destructive tsunami hit this part of the other areas were affected. This part of Japan, if you put it on a map of Japan, Sendai is here, which is just about here. And Machiko and I live here in the city of Tagajo. Sendai is this far inland. The tsunami came about here and the tsunami stopped just about here. This is an aerial photograph of the city where we live before and after the tsunami. This is what it looked like before, and we live in this building here. The border line for the tsunami was this river here. And this is a photograph from the air on the 17th of April, 2011. It's a little bit hard to see. I think you'll see that an awful lot of this area has been flattened. The pine trees that came in Professor Anawat's presentation, they start here. And after the tsunami, most of them were uprooted. Those that weren't uprooted died very shortly. And we live here and we still live here. What did this look like on the ground? This is a photo from within Tagajo city. You can, within the tsunami damaged area, about a month afterwards, you can see that there are some buildings still standing, damaged, but you've got these piles of debris or rubble and debris. And lots of people were inside evacuation areas. This is a gymnasium, probably in a school somewhere in Tagajo city. Oops, excuse me, I'm scrolling too quickly. So if your city is attacked by a tsunami, an earthquake, another major disaster, you want a quick recovery. And for a quick recovery, you need a quick cleanup. And when you start cleaning things up, you have to make decisions on what you throw out and what you don't throw out. So you have to decide what is debris or garbage and what needs to be preserved, for example, as heritage. And then having said that, in the period immediately after the disaster, when there's still need to save people's lives, rescue them from under collapsed buildings, or rescue the bodies of the people who have died. What is heritage doing in this kind of context? It might sound out of place, but in other words, a culture heritage or cultural heritage relevant to DRR. And can culture heritage and cultural heritage even save lives? And actually, the answer to both questions is a strongly affirmative yes. Why? A Copernican change occurred between the Hyogo 2005 action plan and the Sendai framework of 2015. In a nutshell, the change was in Hyogo. The Hyogo action plan talks about building a culture of resilience, whereas in the Sendai framework, they start talking about something else. In the Hyogo framework, for priority number 3, it says you should use knowledge, innovation, and education. Excuse me, this is to build a culture of safety and resilience at all levels. So that mobilizing knowledge, innovation, and education to build a culture of safety and resilience is listed as a core priority. But neither culture heritage nor cultural heritage are identified as independent variables which can support resilience and drive innovation. And in 2015, before the Sendai framework was drawn up, the synthesis report on the Hyogo action plan concluded that the focus of national and international attention must shift from protecting social and economic development against external shocks to transforming growth and development to manage risks in a holistic manner. What does that mean? If you look closely at the disaster, the 2015 framework, priority 3, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. Clause 29 says the public and private investment in disaster risk and reduction through structural and non-structural measures are essential to enhance the economic, social health and cultural resilience of persons, communities, countries, assets, as well as the environment. These can be drivers of innovation, growth, and job creation. Such measures are cost-effective and instrumental to save lives, prevent and reduce losses, and ensure effective recovery and rehabilitation. So, cultural resilience can drive innovation, growth, and employment, and is cost-effective. Whereas in the Hyogo action plan, you're talking about a culture of safety and resilience. This has been, cultural resilience has become an independent variable on the same level as economic, social, and health resilience. Then, moving on, in the next, in the Sendai framework, in what is this, clause or item 30, in order to achieve this reduction for resilience, disaster risk reduction for resilience, it is at the national and local levels, to achieve this, it is important to protect or support the protection of cultural and collecting institutions and other sites of historical, cultural, heritage, and religious interest. In other words, in the Sendai framework, culture is embedded in museums and other institutions and physical sites. This is what I would call big heritage. How do you, for example, how or what, or how or who defines heritage? In the Sendai framework, heritage is the big heritage, in other words, in public museums, libraries, art galleries, and national sites of memories. And this kind of heritage is commonly designated as such by local, regional, national, or international governments or public institutions, and are often protected by public institutions and or laws. This kind of heritage commonly relates to the memory and identity of at regional, national, or international levels, which is why I call it big heritage. But what about the memories of individuals, families, or local communities and the repositories of such memories? If you've got big heritage, I assume that probably we should call these local things little heritage. Okay, take a breath. In Japan, we probably have the single largest amount of documents held in private hands. That figure here, this, oops, sorry, keeps moving. Sorry about doing this. Okay, we're back where we need to be. And I can't, you've got 2,000 million items. And these are all private documents which are not listed as heritage anywhere, and since they're private property, they're not protected by any kind of legal, institutional, legal, well, by laws. Then these items are commonly held by people who were important in local society. They might have been village headmen, local merchants, it might have been a temple. Some person or institution which serves as a focus for the local community. And these documents are put at risk whenever there is a major disaster. Professor Uzumi said that the Miyagi Shiryo Network, of which I am a member, was founded in 2003 in response to an earthquake. Major earthquakes happened again in 2005 and 2008, before the one which you heard about in 2011. After 2011 alone, Miyagi Shiryo Net conducted 105 salvage operations. You can see most of them are along the coast, but again, there is another set that we conducted in inland areas due to earthquake damage. And we took 88 collections of documents into my primary custody because they needed to be cared for, particularly if they had been submerged in seawater along the coast for a long time, for example. Then how can this kind of local heritage help people? The key word here is that this heritage, if you use it properly, can become a powerful form of social support. To just give you some brief examples of how that happens. Salvage operations and the ongoing storing and treating of materials at risk can provide vital bridging and linking social capital between heritage owners and a wide variety outside of the owner's community. A sociological approach to provide building resilience emphasizes building links between disaster victims and, well, amongst disaster victims, and also between disaster victims and people outside of the community. And these are identified as bridging, linking, social capital. The kind of activities, these are, for example, digitally recording all documents. These here are documents which were damaged in the tsunami, but which were rescued and were put into ice storage until we could get round to processing them and, well, cleaning them, and then separating congealed pages and doing other restoration work on the documents. And these all bring together a wide variety of people and link us to disaster victims. It is this incredible variety of networks that happens that can provide support for disaster victims, but also for people in the disaster hinterland who can participate in helping people by preserving heritage. And however, to make sort of the damaged documents actually provide social support, you need to give feedback on what can be learnt about a family or community's history from the salvaged documents. And this can take the form of cataloguing the collection, providing printouts of the digital record, public lectures, this is a public lecture, and also writing booklets which the general public can read, which tell them something about the history of their community and how their community existed before the disaster. This is my personal book here. Another important way you can make salvage operations become a powerful form of psychosocial support is when, well, salvage operations are done by historians, archaeologists, art historians, architects. But if we cooperate with specialists outside our area of specialization, in the particular case of Miyagi Shiryo Net, we have cooperated with a group of psychologists, or clinical psychologists, these psychologists are experienced in support for disaster survivors And the work collaborating, we can greatly enhance the positive effects of salvage operations for owners of private heritage collections. The group of psychologists we cooperated with conducted a series of interviews with owners of heritage collections for that Miyagi Shiryo-net had worked with. And the psychologists used a series of structured interviews, which for the people being interviewed, it sounds as if they're being asked to evaluate the work of the historians, but the interviews are structured so that actually they become a form of psychotherapy for the people who receive the interviews. I don't have time to go into the details of how that works, but it is the interview process itself becomes a form of support for the people who are being interviewed. Case one is a woman in her 70s, and in the interviews, she supplies a series of comments on what she thought about the experience of working with MSN. And then these comments, she is later asked to give a positive or a minor valence to the comments. So you have the comments, excuse me, I can't see my, it's down there. This comment has minus valency, this has a positive valency. And they were also asked to rank which is the most important of these comments. And you will see that actually a lot of their comments are positive. The most positive one here is when Professor C from Shiryo Network rang her up and gave her 10 copies of the booklet I showed you in the previous slide. And we also gave her a printout of her, this woman lost everything. She lost, excuse me, she lost her house, she lost several family members, and she lost all the heritage that she had. But, excuse me, we were able to give her a printout of her heritage, and this became, she put it in front of the Buddhist altar in her house, where the members of her family and her ancestors were enshrined, to let them know that they had regained their past. And a very important thing about this woman's comments was that one of the comments, which is not listed here, is that she had expressed a very strong death wish. By the time she had finished the interview process, which was conducted over a series of weeks, she was able to look at life in a new and positive direction. And this was one of the incredible results of this form of psychosocial support. I've got to hurry. Case B was a man in his 60s. This man is a very different case. This man experienced the earthquake and tsunami of 1976 on a boat which was above the epicenter of the tsunami. And he was on a fishing boat, and he thought that his hometown, which is in Ishinomaki, this is a view of his place. His home was the area where the very first slide I showed you of the warehouse amongst the debris. The debris, that was all down here, and this is a photo 2-3 years after the tsunami, when everything has been cleaned up. And in 1976, this man thought that the same thing had probably happened. Actually, this area was totally safe, so he was lucky. But he began to study about the history of tsunami in his areas, and he reached the conclusion that his area was very vulnerable to a tsunami and that one might strike during his lifetime. And his comments focus on learning from history to pass on experience and when the tsunami came in, he was standing up on this hill and looking down as he watched the tsunami wash everything away. His first thought was, how can I set about rebuilding my area? And he was able to do that because he was already aware that the danger of being hit by a tsunami was very important, and that his task was to get people to focus on how to rebuild. The one very important focus of his identity is this is the warehouse after the clean-out. But this warehouse was going to have to be destroyed so that they could, Ishinomaki City can do urban reconstruction in this area. So what Miyagi Shirionet did was use crowdfunding to put this warehouse on pillars here and to move it to a safe location. And he built a museum in the warehouse, and this is myself and my wife Machiko visiting him after he had the warehouse turned into a museum. To give a summing up of these two cases, both A and B are elderly people without unlimited time left them to rebuild their lives anew from scratch. However, by meeting and interacting with the Miyagi Shirionet, they became able to accept the reality of the disaster and to discover something positive in all the loss and wreckage. In psychosocial terms, the disaster taken as a whole experience enabled them to reconstruct their ego integrity as defined by Erik Erikson within the span of their life cycle. And the key to understanding the benefits of restoring memory in any form is that psychosocial health and disorders and a healthy self-conception are deeply intertwined with memory. So connecting, giving people back their memory, past memory, enables them to envisage the future, and that in itself can help restore their psychosocial well-being. However, in this case, cooperating with experienced clinical psychologists was able to enhance the efficacy of the historian's work to a totally different level. And in the case of example A, when the historians met her, she was psychologically in a very dangerous situation. However, by working with the psychologists who were not providing she didn't think she was getting psychotherapy, but by interacting with psychologists, she was able to rediscover her reason for living. And this is one very clear example of how cultural heritage used the right way can, yes, help save people's lives. So some concluding remarks. Not all heritage is world heritage, national heritage, heritage from long ago, or even good heritage. Some heritage can be very bad, but even so, it is still heritage. The dividing line between heritage and garbage is blurred, ever-changing, and often contested. A disaster can tear up communities apart and alter familiar landscapes. Saving anything that records the past, the little history of a community, can provide members with links to loved but lost people and landscapes. These links transcend time, both past and future. They can give people driven into a dead end a different perspective to see themselves and each other, and provide a starting point for rebuilding lost human bonds and finding a way out of their dead end. Also, not only disasters, but long-term social economic changes such as commercial development can change societies and landscape beyond recognition within a short span of time. Saving local heritage should be done before disaster strikes. The majority of material rescued by Miyagi Shirionet is less than 100 years old. The photo I showed you at the very beginning is are documents from about 150 to 200 years ago. But the majority of material is actually very new. Photos, old home movies, diaries, personal letters, school class records, ledger books, and other records of commercial activities, posters of local events, can all become a window into some aspect of life as it was. The work of volunteer groups such as Miyagi Shiryonet in Japan can provide a cogent example of how items recording the history, even the recent history of a community, can be of how items recording the history of a community can be transformed from garbage into heritage. Properly done, this process can become a powerful form of psychosocial support for all involved and the broader community as well. In Japan, they have a road safety slogan saying that observing traffic rules preserves, not only saves other people, but saves you. That the important part about providing psychosocial support, it not only helps the people in the disaster areas, but it is also a very powerful form of support for people involved. If you want to get a first-hand narrative from local government on how using local heritage and very negative heritage, in this case from a town which had to face total evacuation after the explosion of the nuclear reactors in Fukushima Prefecture. Then an article by Momma Takeshi on, you will find it in a collection of history, heritage, and resilience. If you try that on the internet, you should be able to find it at this site. Then one final concluding remark. If I can scroll back to this screen, the work of myself, if you see that we live here, we, Machiko and I, we are not only just disaster research scholars, but actually we live in a disaster area. I am probably one of the few disaster scholars who has actually evacuated from a tsunami with a disabled person on my back. And what I have, the remarks I have given are both remarks from being a disaster scholar and also being a disaster survivor. Luckily, the tsunami did not affect us badly, but we only knew that after the event. Okay, I have spoken too much and too fast, Professor Izumi. I will pass the mic back to you, and I'll close my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Morris, for your very inspiring and also wonderful presentation. So you really highlighted the both sides of the resilience. Usually we talk a lot about the hard measure of the resilience, but you highlighted the soft side of the resilience and importance of psychosocial support. So I think we still under disaster science, a lot of people talk about rather science and technology and that kind of hard measure. But the point you mentioned is also very important. And what would be necessary to more address that kind of issue in the current disaster science research and studies, I think?
I think that there needs to be more communication between people engaged in the hard aspects of disaster science and more self-confident and affirmative input from people in the humanities and social sciences to bridge the gap that exists between people who deal with things that structures, landscapes, and people like myself who deal with things that are very abstract concepts or can only be recognized not in a physical form, but in terms of people's behavior. That for my part, I place a very strong emphasis on psychosocial support because that is what you really need to do to save people's lives, welfare, living after disasters. The hardware can provide the conditions for people to survive a disaster, to mitigate the effects of the disaster. But after the disaster has actually happened, you need to get people to come together and to stand up and find the willpower to move on. And that is not going to come from seawalls. It's not going to come from highways. It's not going to come from buildings. You need those things for people to survive, but you need an awful lot more to make the community move on. And if you don't get that, then you might get more people dying from despair, loss of the will to live after the disaster than people who are actually killed in the disaster.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
Yes, it's really the wonderful the message to all of us, I think. And I'm very happy and glad you gave us this presentation and we learned a lot from that. Thank you so much, Professor Morris.
Okay, are we out of time, Professor Izumi?
Yes. Okay.
We're out of time. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Morris.
Thank you. Hi.
Okay, so now I'd like to invite the next speaker, Dr. Kanako Iuchi, Associate Professor at Iridis Tohoku University. Active in both practice and research, she has worked in the field of international development planning and disaster risk management for more than 20 years. Specializing in disaster management planning and urban and regional planning and community development. Prior to joining Iridis, she worked as an urban specialist at the World Bank. She has also worked in more than 10 countries across East and South Asia, and South America and Eastern Europe. So I really look forward to your presentation, Dr. Iuchi. So the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon. Again, I'm Kanako Iuchi, and I'm a planner by training. And I'll be talking about planning and climate change with the title, Hazard-Sensitive City Planning in the Era of Climate Change. The title sounds good, but it's an initial reflection of what's happening in Japan and how I'm thinking through this right now. Okay, well, we are experiencing the change of climate, and then the impact of climate change is intensifying. And climate change is making different impacts on communities. And this summer was really hot, and multiple heat waves exceeding 40 degrees Celsius hit Northern Hemisphere and in July and June. And in Japan, it was also very hot. And it was in June, the heat was worst record since 1875, since the recording started. And nationwide heat level triggered electric shortage. We also hear a lot about rising sea levels. For the past 30 years, in some of the ocean basin, there have been a rise of sea level from 15 to 12 centimeters. And there's some portion of the area of the ocean that the sea level is not as high in rising, but then across the world, the levels are generally rising. We are also experiencing the intensified meteorological disasters. We can't really predict how often or frequent typhoon and intense rainfall going to happen as how it used to be before. And those are leading rivers to overflow, urban areas to be inundated, and mountain slides to happen. So Japan is also facing such change. And for example, in 2018, Western Japan had experienced the torrential rain. The Western Japan had intense rainfall for 10 consecutive days in June and July, for more than usual record that for the monthly average. And then the rain had caused the landslides and also the floods, and the death toll had added up to more than 200 in the Western Japan. And it was one of the worst meteorological disasters of the past 35 years. So this intensified in meteorological damage has made governments, the national, local, to pay more attention on land use control for disaster mitigation. And the rationale for having this land use control is by restricting the use of hazardous land or areas, the future loss of life and asset can be reduced. So even if hazardous events happen, if people are not there, nobody would be affected. And the method for this is basically the land use control, and the land use decisions are basically developed on the hazard map that's are scientifically developed. And I'm just showing here an example of tsunami simulation result as a tsunami hazard to be integrated in the recovery plan of the 311 affected city in Higashi Matsushima. Want to go a little bit about the background for spatial risk management in Japan. And it's about the legal framework. It's not very fun, but I just want you to pay a little bit attention for the next two slides. And first, there are a series of acts that related to mitigation of water-related disasters. And those include the Disaster Countermeasures Basic Act of 1961, and the other one is the Flood Control Act of 1949. And then the third one is the River Act of 1964. And I'm not going to go in detail of these acts, but basically, these acts proclaim to protect people and prepare for disasters, including the need to develop, share, and use hazard information by the government to the people. And also would like to highlight that approximately 60 to 70 years we've been relying on these acts. Another set of laws and regulations are related to spatial laws and regulations that addresses disaster risk. One of the very famous one is the Building Standards Law, Article 39 of 1950. And it says that local government designate hazardous areas by enforcing ordinances and controlling building construction from disastrous events. So local government can designate the hazardous zone to not to develop on that land. The other act is the City Planning Act of the 1965, having two articles that are addressing disaster risk. One is Article 7, regulates the need of the local government to classify land between urbanization promotion areas and urbanization control areas to prevent unregulated development. Important part is that it states to consider hazard upon defining land development. The other last one, the Article 33 of the City Planning Act says that talks about the development permit criteria allows of exclusion of lands not suitable for development due to hazard risk. So there are laws and regulations that are saying that you should be avoiding the hazardous land to develop. So what happens if you want to control the land? Usually what happens is that I'm relying again on the map of Higashi Matsushima City, develop hazard map or revise hazard map if you had a former hazard map with new information on damage or new simulation result. And then translate the hazard information into local zoning. So for Higashi Matsushima, what they did was that they took the inundation depth of the projected hazard of tsunami, future tsunami, and then they came up with 3 zones of 1, 2, and 3, depending on the inundation depth. So zone 1 is the area where they had the most they are expected to have the most inundation. And so no residential or other important facilities are can be built on within this zone. But if you look at some of the other zones, like zone 3, buildings can be constructed by raising the floor level. So although the water may reach in the future tsunami, if you have the building higher up, then they would be life will not be affected. So these are the way how traditionally the land use decisions are made. But with the intensified weather, hazard maps are changing, and hazard maps and risk maps are being revised or developed for the worst case scenario. We're having more rains, we're having more typhoons, and so we are revising the maps to cope, to have the better information on hazard. But what it means is that if you look at the local area, one area, the hazardous area is actually expanding. And even some high-risk lands are designated hazardous by local government as a red zone. And once the zone is designated hazardous as red zone, it's really difficult to change the use. And so yes. And so I want to talk a little bit about the definition of the red zone. And red zone is the area that's designated hazardous under evaluation guided by different acts for flooding, landslide, mudslides, slip slope collapse, all kinds of different hazards. And up until now, those red zones were not much proactively considered to be included in the city or land use planning, because once again, if you decided to make the land hazardous, you won't be able to use them. And so that was not what the local governments really wanted. But increasingly, after we are experiencing these intense weather, red zones are proactively considered to be included. And so this is the picture that's been published by the city of Sendai, and then it really explains those red zones to be avoided, to be for development. But in practice, enforcing land use control is really difficult. Again, at normal times, local governments are hesitant to restrict the use of valuable land. And up until now, location designated hazardous have mostly resulted from spot and slope failures. So, for example, if we look at the number of spot and slope failures that's been designated hazardous for the past almost 70 years, since the Article 39 of Building Standard Law was enacted, it has added up to 678,000 points. That's quite a lot of number. And once the hazardous points are designated hazardous, it's been there forever. There are also some areas that are designated hazardous, which are larger than spot or the landslide slid areas. But those are basically designated after significant disasters. And one of the first one is found in city of Nagoya in Aichi prefecture that has been affected by the Ise-1 typhoon of 1959. And with the storm surge that they experienced, I think they lost about 5,000 people. And to avoid future threats like what they have experienced, they designated 70.6 square kilometers as hazardous land. And then in the hazardous land, they also classify different land uses, including the red zone where you can't really have people rebuild any building structure. When you look into some of the urban areas, the areas designated as hazardous is smaller. For example, we know that we had the experience the Kobe earthquake in city of Kobe in 1995. And there they designated approximately 2 hectares. And in city of Nagoya in Niigata prefecture, after the Chuetsu earthquake, their designation was about a little more than Kobe, but then still smaller than like the Nagoya one, about 30 hectares. What was different when we experienced the Tohoku earthquake 311, and after the tsunami, the designation of hazardous area was approximately 157 square kilometers, according to the data of 2014. So this is about twice as much as Nagoya city designation. So it was huge. But overall, land designated hazardous is greatly increasing. And if we look at the Tohoku after the Great East Japan earthquake, the land area designated hazardous has increased by 21 times. That's a huge number. Before the earthquake, the total area in Tohoku region designated hazardous was approximately 780 hectares. But after the earthquake, it has increased to 17,000 hectares almost. And when we look into the details of what kind of land has been designated hazardous, or what hazard they are against. Before the earthquake, it was mostly land hazardous for flooding. But then after the earthquake, it's for tsunami and storm surge. So you can also see how the rebuilding from the tsunami have restricted a large portion of the land. Again, but Tohoku is very unique in this sense. But I am also seeing similar trends nationwide with the increased meteorological disasters. So what we are seeing here is that first, designated hazardous land has continued to increase for the past 70 years. It has accumulated and continued to accumulate. And with intense weather, hazardous areas are expected to continue to widen in each location. And then even the hazardous area that's been assumed continue to widen, not all the areas can be restricted because it's going to be too much. Also, pattern of hazardous forces, the way how that we will be experiencing rain or typhoons, are increasingly unpredictable. So what that means is that even if we have hazard and risk maps, we can't totally rely on that. Actual disaster can happen differently from what we expect. And unfortunately, in the past, hazard and risk maps have proven to be less useful than what we had hoped. So one other movement that I seen recently is that some prefecture, for example, in Aichi prefecture, and actually this year, have reverted the restricted area that has been designated as hazardous. And they did revised hazard assessment, and they found out that the area that's been designated hazardous is no longer can be is hazardous according to the revised assessment. So this reverting is the opportunity for better use of land, and I think it's a great way of considering the use of the land that once been designated hazardous. But it's really important to keep sharing the past information as well, because again, hazard maps builds on assumption, and it's not perfect. So my conclusion for the initial reflection is that efforts to reduce hazard impacts will continue and grow. And thankful to our improved technologies, we will be having better predictions and we will be having better maps. And this better map will be used much more for sure, and it will perhaps increase awareness and practice on hazard risk reduction. And what I mean by that is that local government would start thinking about designating more hazardous land. However, at the same time, the traditional approach to hazard sensitive land use is at a point of shift in perspective. And the reason for this is that extreme meteorological impact of climate change is bringing in unpredictable impacts. We don't know what can happen. And then the other thing is that the traditional risk reduction efforts through like hazard mapping or land use may not meet the speed of the climate change. So we probably need to start thinking about a different way to approach the hazard approach of adapting into the climate change, changing climate. The good news is that we are seeing changes on city and land use planning as a sign of adaptation to the current environment. And I think it's very important that we revisit the former land that's been designated hazardous to again revisit, because the situation changes over time, have changed over time. And one of the good example, I think, was the reverting the restricted area by Aichi prefecture. And so as a conclusion, I would like to say, studying better use hazard information and wisely adapting to the changing environment is really important. And so this is end of my talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iuchi, for your wonderful presentation and very informative. And you highlighted the importance and the change in improvement of land use planning at this point. And also you said in practice, enforcing land use control is difficult. That's what we are, often hear from everywhere. But you give us some good news at the end. So it's good to know things are very improving, and now we are considering the risk of climate change as well. So we have a couple of questions for you, and thank you for your presentation. And when you say revised, updated hazard map, does local communities has any input, or is it entirely done of relevant government officials? And also, are there any needs or consideration to revise, update old acts, laws considering involving multi-hazards and extreme events like 2018 Western Japan flood, as most of them were drafted when there were almost negligible consideration about climate change impacts?
Well, so for the first question was the a revision of the hazard map, whether the community information will be included. I believe, as far as I understand, most of them are, I think Japan relied very much on the technology that then the data information that damage information, the hazard information that they use is based on the information that's been received from the machines and the measurement. So I don't think the community inputs are that much considered in that regard. And so that's the first answer to the first question. And revise the old acts and laws for multi-hazard. I think that, and again, I'm this is my initial reflection, and I'm still studying on this, but the revision will probably, I mean, rather than having the revision, they have the old acts and laws to continue to run, but then they will be adding new acts and regulations that will modify from the perspective of new phenomenon. And I think that's what I understand so far.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your answer, Dr. Iuchi. And we also received more questions, but unfortunately, due to the time limitation, I think we need to move on. So would you please answer these questions by typing through the Q&A?
All right, I'll do that. Thank you,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iuchi, for your participation from the US. And I know that's a very late evening, so thank you so much. And
thank you.
Take care. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to introduce Professor Fumihiko Imamura as the last speaker, of course, but not least, at today's session. He is the director of the Hazardous Tohoku University and professor of tsunami engineering. He specializes in tsunami engineering and natural disaster science and has been conducting numerous studies, researches on the development of tsunami warning system and disaster mitigation measures in the Pacific, aiming to reduce tsunami damage. So thank you so much, Professor Imamura, for your participation when you are extremely busy. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for my introduction. Let me start my talk as the last speaker today. So can you see my slide?
Yes, we can see that. Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much again for the participation in this seminars. My title today is Tsunami Reduction in Japan. Especially, I would like to share the experience and the lessons from the 2011 for DRR in the future. So this is the slide in the beginning of my talk. It is sure we are living in the ring of fires, especially in the Pacific Ocean, and we cannot control and avoid such natural disasters. But the idea of the build back better, including the risk management for the future, should reduce them, and we need to living together with the harmony of the natures. So next slide is just a brief introduction of the tsunami countermeasure in Japan. And we have two types of the measured. One is the structure measured, including the seawall and breakwater, dike, and so on. Especially the controlling forest, it is the green infrastructure. And we have the non-structure measured, of course, including the warning and some evacuation building to support the saving life and the education and the awareness and monument to transfer the experiences. So you can see the example on the slide, see the structure and the non-structures. So unfortunately, we are in the beginning of the 21st century, but it's surely increasing the risk globally. So that's why we need to study more about the past disasters and future disasters. So this is an example of the giant earthquake followed by tsunami over the 100 years in the 20th century or 21st. So you can see the 2004 Sumatra and the Indian Ocean tsunami was huge. More than 30,000 people died due to this only one event, and followed by the 2011 Japan also killed 20,000 people, and we have another earthquake in Chile and New Zealand. Still, it continues. So it is, I can say, the very high risk now. So after the 2011, Tohoku University started a new research institute for the disaster reconstruction and regeneration research here. We have the major 8 projects. First one is the EDDES, our research institute, and covered the community health and environmental energy and ICT and marine science and so on. And additionally, we have more than 100 various volunteer projects were started at that time. And the one of measured project is the EDDES, International Research Institute of Disaster Sciences, a new institute to reduce the tsunami and other natural disasters. We are here in the damaged area. The institute has the 7 divisions and 36 fields. You can see this map. So the divisions are located according to the disaster management cycle. So before the generation of the disasters, we need the disaster sciences to make a hazard map and so on. And after the generation, we need the technology to transfer the information of warning, and we need humans and social studies, especially to support and some receive the help. And we have the special team of the disaster medical studies to save life and rescue for them. And 5th is the recovery reconstruction studies after the 2011, and also it contributes to the other disasters. And the last one is the tradition and archive study. It is one of the ICT. So our mission is to establish the more practical disaster management studies to identify and theorize disaster-related phenomena in each stage, actually 4 stages of the disaster cycle, and establish the area disaster management study that should support building society more resilient to the disasters. So we have the International Alliance for Research and Higher Education. You can see the map. So we have good communities with many university and institute, and which should be contribute to the international society through the platform, such as APRU, you joined today, especially multi-hazard program. We have ARC DR3, architecture and DRR. And we have the special forum, it is called World Bosai Forum. So every 2 years, we have the such forum in Sendai, Japan. And this should be also contribute to the international society through the United Nations for DRR. So just let me explain the issue of the tsunami warning and reverse system to save life in the 2011 and afterwards. So just after the big earthquake offshore Tohoku, we have the tsunami warning system to people to evacuate. So it is order and make a warning immediately after the earthquake to the all around the coastal area in Japan. Actually, tsunami reached to the less than 20 and 30 minutes, still kind of the enough time for the people to evacuate if they are quickly make actions. And more than 7 times tsunami affect to the coastal area of Japan and more. Actually, the tsunami continued for 2 days. So you can see the example of the computer graphic of the tsunami at the time. You can see the attack to the Japan as well as the other area in the Pacific Ocean. The tsunami provoked more than 700 kilometers per hour, like a jet plane. So you can see the reach to the Hawaii and also to the west coast of the US and passing to the New Zealand in the south and to the middle America and finally to the South America, including the, Peru and Chile. So take now 20 hours, almost 1 day to reach from Japan to the Chile. And another 1 day, this tsunami reflected from Chile and go back to the Japan. So that's why the 2 days tsunami continue this area. So as I said, Japan have the tsunami warning, which is one of the non-structural measures. So whenever earthquake happened, especially in the sea area, we have the information of the tsunami, which is generated or not by using the seismic data, location and magnitude and intensity, so on. So within 3 minutes, we have the information about tsunami arrival time and the tsunami height followed this flow chart. So by the Japanese meteorological agency. So this is one of the advanced, I think, developed warning system in the world. So, but what happened at the time, 2011 March? So first information of the tsunami like this, the first magnitude was 7.9, which much smaller than the actual magnitude of the earthquake because of the, at the time, the so large earthquake and we have the limitation to record and estimate the earthquake magnitude correctly. So this underestimate the information gives us the smaller tsunami height we predicted. Miyagi only 6 meters, Iwate and Fukushima only 3 meters. So this also look like large, but we have the seawall around the coast more than 5 meters to 10 meters. So this information tell the people don't need to evacuate because they're only 3 to 6 meters. It is lower than the seawall which existed. but the actual tsunami was not so much larger. But we have the real-time observation system to detect the tsunami offshore. So that information you can see the right-hand side, sorry. So it provides the warning device. So by using such kind of real-time information, the information are updated time by time, but sometimes too late for people to make actions. So this is the big issue for us. We have the real-time, the earthquake and tsunami information, but this is not enough. So we need more dense observation system offshores. So this is example of the improvement of the earthquake tsunami observation offshore the Tohoku, and more station under the sea connected by the fiber cable to detect earthquake tsunami very shortly. So it advanced, but sometimes we need the new technology by using the AI. So sometimes the limited number of the observation system, so we need some additional estimation such as AI. So we apply the new way to make information for the instant tsunami prediction by AI. So let me change another topics, which is the reconstruction for resident community in the affected area. So you can see the map. This is the tsunami along the coast, and the tsunami seawall here from north to south. The blue bar showing the height or level of the seawall. But the yellow dot is the actual tsunami. So most of area tsunami are much larger than the level of the seawall. So structure measured is very effective, but sometimes the more high tsunami are affected, and behind the seawall, the area should be inundated. So we need the combination of the structure and the non-structure. So after these experiences, we decided to make a safety level, first of the level or second of the level. So first one, of course, to protect the tsunami and to protect the human life and community from the tsunami. So by using the structure. But sometimes the limitation of the height. So not we cannot make a higher than the 2011. It is too large, more than 30 minutes. So we need combination of the level 2. So we have the limitation of the seawall, but over the part of the tsunami, we need to evacuate, or we need to make some kind of land use. So we have the now two type of the level of the seawall. So after the tsunami, this is the two type of the relocation. We have the one example, so cutting mountain, so some residential area going to the more higher level, but sometimes not enough the higher level, so we put the soil to make a higher level artificially, so we can move. So sometimes we need a seawall as lower as possible. So we need a kind of combination. So you can see another example of the combination to protect from the tsunami, which is the idea of the multifunction mitigation system from the tsunami as well as the river flood. So you can see the shores, which is the seawall, concrete, 7.2 meter. We try to as lower as possible, and the tsunami control forest behind, and we have the shelters, and we utilize the highway to elevate to work as a protection like a dike. So you can see the example of this multi-layer process, so which is called Build Back Better example in the reconstruction project in Sendai. So green area is the green forest, and behind the city wall, and the red one is the elevated roadway like this, and we have another highway in the behind, and we have some kind of control the land use. Some are not allowed to leave the hills, but we can allow to backside of the highway. So we have the new residential area. And this area utilized for the energy, new type energy, and so on. So anyway, this is my talk today. So this is the short remarks. So after the 2011, we have the new institute, including the IRIDES, and we need the more science and technology to mitigate the natural disasters. And our mission is to identify and theorize the disaster risk phenomena. So we have the new idea to effect the kind of integration of the theory and practice. So we need research and more practical action with the people. So even the very limited time, but please allow me to show the one video to introduce the present situation of the affected area. So this is a promotion video. Please look at.
So his story was a story of survival, how you can survive through what anything is thrown at you. So never to give up.
She talked about her experience when she was a middle school student and the tsunami came. And she described it in extreme detail. It almost felt like I was there and the ground was shaking.
Something that I think that I can take with me from after hearing her story is the importance of talking to your family about what you're going to do if something like that does happen.
It kind of just makes me think about how important it is to really think about that everything can just change in one day. You really have to cherish every one of those days.
For me, this area, the Sanrika area, is an area that has great beauty, it has great seafood, but it also comes with the harsh climate and the dangers that are associated with living so close to the ocean.
During the whole experience, I was trying to imagine a tsunami that tall. I looked out from the height and I'm like trying to imagine everything being water. And I can almost see it, but it's still really hard to imagine.
It kind of gives you hope when you come here and you see that not everything is bad. There's always a good side to different things.
Okay, so this is the end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Imamura, for your presentation and also sharing that wonderful video that was very short, but I think it was very impactful and to see that real situation after the tsunami. And also you are leading the project of Densho Road. There are a lot of disaster remains. And would you please share about that information on the Densho Road as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. The name of Densho in Japanese is the kind of tell the story and transfer our experiences and lessons. So we have the damaged building and the new museum and the special centers for the visitors. So along the coast, more than 50 buildings and centers and museum already started for the kind of for the visitors. So we are now connecting them as a network. So we have the new private organization to help the activity as a Densho Road 3.11. So it is a kind of the platform for the people in Japan and overseas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Imamura, for the information. And I think it's very important to learn from these disaster remains and museum the facilities, and about what happened, and also how we can bring that message to the next generation. So thank you so much, Professor Imamura, for your participation when you are extremely busy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. And so that is all for today's session. I would like to express our sincere appreciation to all the speakers today, Dr. Christopher Tremewan, Professor Imamura, and Professor John Morris, and Dr. Kanako Iuchi, and Dr. Anawat Sapasri for sharing their impressive research and experiences. And also thank you to all the audience who joined us today. I hope you enjoyed the presentations and learned from their disaster science researches and experiences. So I intentionally, we mixed the fields and different expertise of disaster science. So I really hope you enjoyed the disaster science from the different perspectives and different fields. So please be informed that the recording video and the slides will be shared on the APRU website later. So for organizing this webinar, I really received a lot of support from the APRU colleagues, International Secretariat in Hong Kong, and also Iredis. And I would like to thank to all my colleagues here and in Hong Kong. And also we will have the next week, and we will have the second session on this webinar series, 5th of August. The title is Disaster Risk Management Initiatives in Various Sectors and Fields. We invited 4 speakers with the different fields and expertise. So like this week, you can learn disaster science from the different perspectives, and the next week is different organizations. So please register for the session if you have not done that yet. And please note that a certificate will be provided to those who completed these 2 sessions, not 1 session. So we look forward to meeting you again next week. And once again, thank you so much for your participation today, and have a good day and good night. Thank you. See you next week.